See that people are showing up, and that's wonderful. I'm wondering, Diane, if you would lead us in just like a short centering practice so I can like get my own shit together.
All right, everybody. Wherever you are, whether you're seated in a chair or sitting on the floor, I want you to root down with whatever's making contact with the earth. So that's foundational. So wherever your feet are or your butt is or whatever is making contact with the earth, I want you to really root down. Spread your toes. Root down through the big toe mound of your foot, inner heel, outer heel. So if it's not your feet that are making contact with the earth, or it's your butt making contact with a chair, I want you to slightly lean forward and root through your pelvis and your sit bones. If that's not available to you, then placing your forearms on maybe the arms of a chair, drawing the lower tips of the shoulder blades back and down, bringing the chin parallel to the floor, and softening the gaze. You can either close your eyes or take a soft gaze forward. And then notice all the places where you make contact with either a chair, the floor, a wall, wherever it is that you are. And just root into those spaces. And now bring the awareness to the tip of your nose. Notice how the breath is cool at the tip of your nose as you inhale slowly for a count of 1, 2, 3, 4, and exhale completely for a count of 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and pause. Inhale for a count of 4, 3, 2, pause, hold. Exhale for a count of 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and pause. Now continue on your own, inhaling for a count of 4, perhaps exhaling for a count of 6, 8, or 10. And let's repeat 3 of these breaths just on our own. Let's do one more together. Now bring the tips of the fingertips together, tenting the palms. And just notice once again what you're feeling. And often this particular mudra is good for bringing awareness, for clearing the mind and calming the mind, for soothing any heat in the body, for bringing focus back. So just take a moment to feel the pads of the finger touching each other. The palms are apart. Just notice what happens when you do that, making space for the breath. Now slowly begin to blink your eyes open if they are closed. Bringing your focus back to center, rubbing your palms together, lots of heat. And then gently cupping your palms just over your eyes. And now slowly bringing your awareness back. Hopefully that was helpful.
Thank you, Diane. Hi, everyone. I can see that we have a lot of folks joining us. Thank you for your patience. It seems like Facebook Live is not only giving us a hard time, but a lot of folks. So thank you for tuning in and putting up with the very humanness of online digital broadcasting, which is, our new reality for a bit. So thanks for joining us today, Diane. I'm sure that most of the folks attending know you and your work, but would you just take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are? And then while Diane is doing that, it would be a great time for you who are listening, if you have questions for us, to post them in the chat box. So that'll be how you'll ask your questions. You can post questions at any time, and then we will just answer them as we can. If we don't get to everybody, then we'll figure out a way to maybe post some of those in the online community. So Diane, tell us a little bit about yourself and your work, and
for those of you who don't know me, my name is Diane Bondi. Fun fact, I'm a Canadian, so I'm over here in the Windsor area, which is directly, believe it or not, across from Detroit. So I sometimes think of myself as an honorary Michigander. I live 20 minutes from downtown Detroit, across the river in Windsor. I have been a yoga teacher, movement teacher, fitness instructor, you name it, for the past 35 years. I started teaching movement classes when I was 17 as part of a gym class, a mandatory gym class I had to take, and we were given an independent study project, and I decided to teach a stretch class. Okay, so this would have been 1986 or 1987, somewhere around there, and I had been practicing yoga at that point since 1973. So I had shared what I had learned from my mom, what I had learned from books, what I had learned on my own, and did this little independent project of stretching, and that kind of started my movement career. So I've taught fitness classes, I've taught step, I've been a personal trainer, I've done all the things. One thing that's always been running in the background has been my yoga practice, which my mother introduced me to when I was 3 years old. I have a book, it's not here, I think I put it on my bookshelf, called Stay Young or Be Young with Yoga. And that's a book that my mother had bought at a flea market in England, of all places, in Liverpool, of all places. And when she emigrated to Canada, the book came along with her. And when she had my brother, my sister, and myself, she started a yoga practice to help with stress of having 3 kids under the age of 4. So I've always had yoga in my life for as long as I can remember. And it just, and it kind of progressed into a movement practice. And then I started teaching yoga probably full-time and professionally, maybe full-time about 20 years ago. I have been drifting on and off my mat for the past, 47 years. And I've decided, when I started going to public yoga spaces, I was noticing that teachers were not able to accommodate for students who weren't physically fit and able-bodied and could do the poses, easily. And I thought that was problematic. So I decided to open a yoga studio that specialized in creating more accessible classes for all kinds of bodies, all kinds of shapes, all kinds of people. So I really wanted to have a practice that reflected what I looked like, reflected what my friends looked like, reflected the people in my life, how they practiced. So I opened Eastside Yoga in 2005, and it was open for 10 years. And I ran that studio for 10 years until I sold it. And I've been educating since 2010. I started my first 200-hour teacher training that really focused on creating accessible spaces and adapting yoga practices and making sure that people who felt marginalized by this practice or underestimated by this practice could be fully realized within this practice. And that's how I started. Last year, in April, I had a book published by Penguin Random House called Yoga for Everyone. And I'm currently editing my second book that I'm doing with Shambhala Publishing, that I'm doing alongside my friend Kat, called Yoga Where You Are. So it's been a journey. Yoga has been a big part of my life for the better part of 47 years. A week from today, I'll be turning the big 50. So it's been something that's been in the forefront of my mind.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here with us today, Diane. And Diane and I, for those of you that don't know, have both been teaching online for a long time. I remember when I first started posting my first videos to YouTube back in 2010, Diane was one of the few people that I was able to see online and know that other folks were doing this. So we've been teaching an online course together called Yoga for All Teacher Training since 2015. And over 900 teachers now have gone through that course and that certification. I know, can you believe it?
No!
So Diane and I have been getting a ton of questions and requests and emails and everything since you know, this pandemic has forced a lot of our studios to close and our classes to not be able to gather. And so we just wanted to do this little online Q&A. And so we've got a few questions coming in. I'm gonna go ahead and like read the questions out loud. Feel free to keep posting them in the chat box. There's also an ask a question function, which I'll also be checking there. So one question that we got was like keeping track of things. So the question says, as I teach online classes through Zoom, my biggest challenge right now is managing payments, emails for Zoom links, and organizing who wants which class, and keeping track of who actually attends, and all of that stuff. Any tips? So what I would say is that there's kind of two ways that you can go with this, and then Diane will see what you have to add. You can either kind of cobble it together yourself, right? Which it sounds like you're doing, right? Maybe you have, like, you've got a Zoom link, maybe you're sending out some emails, you've got a separate payment link, and there's kind of a lot going on. I think you can definitely do it that way, but I would try to streamline your process a little bit. So what I would do is have a central place, maybe that's your website, maybe that's your Facebook page, where you list all the events that you're doing, along with a registration link for each one. So you can, for registration, I would recommend something like Google Forms. It's free, it's very easy to set up, and then you'll have a unique URL for each registration where folks can fill out and register for the class. And then in Google Forms, when you create that, what I would do is just put a step-by-step, this is how you get to the class. Step 1, fill out this form. Step 2, or maybe step 1 is payment, and then you have the link to that. Step 2, fill out this form. Step 3, you know, you'll receive an email with your details. And then what you can do is in Google Forms, you can have it where it will display something on the screen after they fill it out. Y'all definitely please check the chat too, because other people are chiming in with their answers, which are really great. So you can kind of do it that way. And when you create a Google form, there's an option to have it go to its own spreadsheet. And so I would just make one of the options, like which class are you registering for? That way it's very easy to sort that spreadsheet and see like who's registered for what, and you can check that against like the payments that have come through. The other option is to use a platform that does this for you. So platforms like Crowdcast, Shannon chimed in and said Schedulicity, Offering Tree, Ustream. There's a NamaStream. There's a bunch of platforms that actually do this kind of workflow for you. And Em, will you share the link to the COVID teacher resource doc that's been created and crowdsourced? There are a ton of links in there of different platforms that people use. And so the pros and cons are, if you do it yourself, the cost can be very low, but it's really kind of labor intensive to be checking back and forth. The platforms that are available, generally there's a cost associated with that. So it's really up to you whether you'd like to, you know, maybe you have a little bit of money available that you can kind of throw at the problem and simplify for yourself, or maybe you don't have as much money available and you really want to just use like your own energy to put that together. Diane, do you have any thoughts about like workflow or that kind of keeping track for payments and stuff?
I was going to say exactly the same thing. In my previous life, I didn't mention, but I was an accountant, so I'm a spreadsheeter. So I like everything in a spreadsheet. I like to have a class list. I like to have waivers. I like to create like a Google Doc and then a Google spreadsheet and cross-check those if I'm not going to be using a platform that does this for me. I think the costs for these things on these platforms are pretty nominal if you think about all the labor-intensive things that you have to do in order to make sure you get all your payments. So the good thing is with those platforms like Schedulicity and Offering Tree, they're tracking that for you, and it's easier to do the cross-check. So I think if it's available to you and people are paying you, to invest part of that payment that you're getting from people into having these platforms. Not only are they easier to use for you, they're also easier to use for your students. And what I have found, and Amber and I Amber, you can attest to this, that often yoga people are low tech people in terms of they're not usually tech savvy with a lot of things. So in order for them to have access to your classes and to keep this as simple as possible, I would do the research and look at which one of these platforms is the most cost effective for you and do it that way, just because it's good. I like to eliminate the frustration factor for myself. And I have enough labor intensiveness, creating classes, putting a schedule together, promoting them, being online, answering questions, that if this can be handled for me, I'd rather invest my time in creating really great content and less time in trying to track and cross-check and check this spreadsheet and create this link here. And what is this person paying? And is it on PayPal? Mm-hmm. I would rather not do all those things. I want to provide the best content possible. So for me, that's an investment that I'm willing to make. If it's not, you see that what Amber outlined is probably the best way to do it.
Yeah. And I want to say thanks to Shannon Crow, who's posting a lot of resources in the chat right now. So definitely make sure you check that out. Shannon also has an amazing resource called the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast, and has been sharing a lot of stuff in her group as well about going online and teaching and stuff like that. So y'all definitely check that out. I want to talk a little bit about online waivers, because that's something that I got questions about ahead of time, and also I saw it came into the chat. So online waivers, first of all, do you need a waiver? That is a really good question. Mel, if you'll post the link to the waivers crowdsource doc, that would be great. So Em is going to post in the chat about a crowdsourced document that a lot of people have been working on to see, like, with the leading insurance carriers, who requires a waiver, what do you have to do, can you teach online, and does your insurance cover that? We've gotten a really mixed bag of answers, okay? So some of the companies are saying, like, yes, you can teach online, but you have to have a waiver and you have to charge for the class. Others are saying you don't need a waiver at all, because if the person is practicing in their own home, they're covered by their own insurance, not yours. And so I really advise everybody to call your own insurance carrier and find out exactly what you need to do and just follow that the best that you can. One thing that I would have everyone do if they're going to join like a Zoom call or whatever online platform you have, you can set your waiver up in Google Forms, like we mentioned about the other, right? And then before you give them the Zoom link, right, to get into your class, you have them go to the Google form, read the waiver, and then sign it at the bottom by putting their name and the date. You really want to make sure you have both the name and the date, because then that's like for your records. Then what I would have it do is, like, when the form is complete, then give them that Zoom link or that URL. So as far as waivers, Diane, do you have any tips or things that you like to make sure are included on the online waivers?
I'm lucky. I have a lawyer in my family. So I had a lawyer draft the waiver, telling me full on, I don't know how it is in the United States, but here in Canada, you can have people sign waivers for stuff, but they're not legally binding. So I had them create the waiver for me, and it's just making sure that people understand that any kind of physical activity comes at a risk. Walking to the bottom of your driveway to get your mail comes at a risk. So making sure that people are fully aware of that. And there's only so much you can control with a waiver. I constantly tell people, go at your own pace, take your knee down, whatever. But people are going to do what they're going to do. So I would make sure people understand that they are responsible for their own practice. Yeah. I think we kind of live in a time where people don't want to be responsible for themselves and want everything kind of done for them, but people do need to know that any physical activity comes with a risk. Like I said, that includes vacuuming your house. That comes at a risk. I actually fell down the other day vacuuming. So I'm just saying, make sure people are fully aware that they are participating in something physical. Make sure that you stress in that waiver that you're taking this at your own pace, and that you consult a physician before you start any physical activity. And that's what what I always have in my waivers. I am more than happy to share with you the waiver that I have that my lawyer created for me. I have it in a Google Doc, and you can just switch out what information you need to switch out. And I'm assuming a waiver is a waiver is a waiver. I'm assuming a waiver in Canada is very similar to a waiver in the United States.
Yeah, and basically, you know, many of you probably already know this, but a waiver is not something that like will protect you from a lawsuit necessarily. Basically, it's just like, it's part of a, you know, if you get sued for whatever, it's part of the case. And so sometimes, you know, like it's not a open and shut, like, oh, this person signed the waiver, so there's no lawsuit, but it's just, it's like sort of a deterrent. And so, but just the thing to know is that many of the insurance companies require it if you're going to teach online and still be covered by the policy. So my best advice, call your insurance carrier and ask them what their policy is. And I would specifically ask the question about if they're practicing in their own home, are they covered by their own, you know, policy or their homeowner's insurance or whatever, or is it still on me? Because they may not mention that, but that might actually be something that, you know, they will confirm if you ask.
The waiver is really just a deterrent. Like when people sign a waiver, it just slows them down from the suing process. Right. And so that's the only thing that it offers. And it may offer a little peace of mind. I mean, I had lawyers come into the studio when I had a waiver in the studio and tell me every time, you know, this isn't legally binding. And my reaction to them was, then you won't mind signing it. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah. And then we had another question about the Google Forms that I keep mentioning, whether that was supposed to be like a pro business suite account or the free one. I'm talking about the free one. Yeah. You can do a ton with the free stuff. You don't need to have a business account through Google to use it. There are also some other great forms like Typeform and Wufoo, WUFOO, that all, and what is it?
Jot.
Yeah. So that have forms that you can get a free trial with most of these if you want to play around with them. I would also check out and see if you're already using a program like MailChimp or ConvertKit or some kind of email marketing software. Oftentimes they have the ability within the software to create your own form or landing page. Don't let the landing page terminology scare you off. That just means literally a page with the email sign-up form in it. And so maybe you already have capability to create a form that actually links up with your email list, because then you don't have to like go in Google Forms later, get all the emails, bring them over. So that's one way that you might want to check if you're having folks register for online events, which I definitely recommend, just so you can keep track of like who came and how many and all of that stuff. Maybe use your own email software and just think about creating a landing page or a sign up form there. You can even create like a landing page or a sign up form for each online event that you have. That way it's a little easier to keep track. In your email software, often you can go specifically into that list and just see who's on that list rather than, you know, your whole list of subscribers or whatever.
And I mean, Google, Gmail does that for you too. Like, I mean,
the Google Forms. Yeah. Okay, let's go to a different question here. So I have one here. When you're teaching online, do you still try to observe your students as you teach for alignment, safety, etc., or is that impossible due to small screens and numbers? So Diane, what do you have to say about that for live classes?
That is tough due to small screens and numbers. So it really, really does depend. And like if you're doing a group private and you've got 4 people in your class, it's a little easier to watch. The problem is I find sometimes is because it's such a visual platform, people are looking at you teaching less so than when you're in a public class. Like when I'm in a public class, I don't do the class with my class. I walk around, right? Like I give instructions, I walk around, I offer help to people who need help. When you're teaching online, a lot of times I'm noticing we are actually practicing so that people can see what we're doing because we don't know exactly who's showing up. But if you're doing a small group private, let's say in Zoom, and you can see your students and you feel comfortable to, you know, perhaps sit and instruct, then it's easier to look and see where people's needs are, see what people are doing, see what their alignment is like. But of course, it's not going to be as detailed as being there in person. I find depending on the size of the class, that can be a bit of a challenge. So if you're a real stickler on alignment, you always give the verbal cues. and see what you can see. Perhaps you have classes that are smaller and you charge a little bit more in order to provide more alignment cues, if that's important. For me, when I'm teaching, I really, again, try to give the autonomy back to the student and just constantly remind them, you know, what they should be doing, where they should be, or you know, I shouldn't say should, what they could be doing in their bodies, how they can be aligning their bodies, and just do the best you can with what you have. It's hard. And a lot of times when you're putting up videos online, let's say you're pre-recording videos and putting them up online, there's no way to watch people because they're practicing to a pre-recorded videos. So I think the responsibility is a little bit different because you're not there in person.
Yeah, and I think
autonomous.
Sorry, say that last part again.
They need to be a little bit more autonomous in their practice.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting opportunity. Like online teaching is different than teaching in a room full of people. Full stop. Like it is different. You know, when we're in a room together, we can affect one another through our nervous systems and our body language. Like that's, you know, when you think about like a centering practice is to like bring the energy of the group to the same place. It's a little harder to do that online. And so I think that one opportunity that you have when you teach online is to do a little bit of like guesswork about what the students might be experiencing. And if you give alignment cues, especially like verbal cues, or you're trying to guide folks through like a sensory experience or whatever, that's stuff that they, you know, can like self-correct. And I don't even like the word correct, but like they can self-adjust. And you can probably guess, like, you know, if when you usually teach side angle pose, you know, you got some people with their arm in a weird and uncomfortable position, you know, spin the palm of your hand towards the ceiling and then bring your arm up and over. Like, you know what generally people are going to do. Like, you've seen them before. And so you can give some of those cues. I really don't try to like watch individual screens and offer alignment cues. It's really hard to do live. Just don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Encourage your students to like,
that's a good idea.
this is the chance for them to really like get in touch with what's going on in their own bodies, and maybe even some opportunities for you to offer like places that they can explore things. Go ahead,
Can I jump in here for a sec? You know, when I teach online, and I get this criticism a lot, is people will say to me, "Oh my God, you talk a lot," right? When you're teaching online, because I'm trying to give all those cues, right? So when I'm teaching online and on online platforms, I'm giving all the cues, right? I'm telling people where they're putting their energy. I'm telling people to line up their, you know, their spine over their hips. I'm telling people to really extend out through their arms, because then I've given them all the cues, and then it's up to them to explore it in their own body. And somebody on here said something really great. I missed the comment. Yes, here. So Lisa said, I think online teaching is such a great opportunity for teachers to direct attention towards the student's own internal experience. 100%. How does this feel? And I think that's a fair assessment to let that happen. I mean, again, if you're doing a small group private, 2 people, 3 people, then you can maybe look up and look out or whatever. But big online classes, it's not going to happen. Sorry.
Yeah. And one thing that I'll just say before we move on to a different question is that, oh my gosh, it just went out of my head.
Sorry. That's my life all the time.
What was it? Hold on. I'll think of it. Oh, I have noticed when I used to do like privates online, that folks would be used to being in a scenario where the teacher was demonstrating the whole time.
Yeah.
Yet they would want me to give feedback on like what was going on. And so you can't like be back here demonstrating and see them on the tiny screen and then like run in. So be patient with yourself. It might take a little while for you to kind of get a working rhythm where you're close so people can hear you and where you can observe what's going on. But then you might have to jump back and demonstrate a few things. And that's going to be just like when you're teaching a regular class. You know, maybe you're one of those teachers that demonstrates the entire time, but more than likely you talk a little bit, you demonstrate something, you walk around, you check it out. And so like, just think about how that experience might translate to online and be patient with yourself. It's not going to be perfect. I mean, Diane and I have been teaching online for a decade and we still couldn't get this live stream to work. So just know.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be perfect to be like, it's you. And that's why people want to practice, is because you're their teacher. So,
and a lot of people I've noticed in online classes aren't so much looking at you as they are listening. So making sure that your instructions are super clear. So this is a great opportunity for you to get really clear with your instructions. And one thing that I teach in my 200-hour teacher training is to record yourself teaching on your phone, just the audio, not the video, and then play it back and see if you can practice to that, like just the audio. And if you are struggling with your own instructions, then that's an opportunity for you to clarify your instructions. Somebody else also put up on here, if you can get somebody in your house to practice along with you while you're teaching online, then you can actually look at them, because they're going to be a good litmus test, or a good opportunity to see what's going on. But you always know the basic alignment cues that you see go awry in every single yoga class. Like, I can't even take a class without looking at people's knees. Like, I'm constantly like, where are your knees? What are your knees doing? Where are your knees? And so even taking the class, so give yourself a break. This is not a perfect, it's not a perfect transition away from a live and in-person class. It's a hand-drawn facsimile. So we just have to work with what we've got.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I want to talk about pricing, because we got 2 questions about that so far. One person said, I'm the sole owner, teacher at a small studio. I'm teaching on Zoom. I haven't charged for the last 2 weeks as I got used to the platform, but I know this is temporary. Should I charge classes, take donations? I have rent and a landlord who thinks everyone is making too much of that Corona thing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, my sympathy is to you, first of all.
I have to say
To all of us who are figuring this out. I think it's amazing to try out the platform, get your hands dirty, try it out with friends, but now you're comfortable with it. Yes, you should be charging for your classes. I'd like to, talk about a few ideas for financial accessibility. And then also just and then Jeevanette also posted a question, like, how do you know how much to charge? So Diane, do you want to talk about, do you want to answer first? And then I have some ideas too. So should people be charging? How do we decide how much to charge?
Yes, people should be charging. How I usually decide how much to charge is I look and see what the going rate is. I have an online platform, so it's hard to figure out what one class is, what one class should cost. And of course, it's not going to be the same as your $15 or $25 drop-in when you get a live and in-person class. I would scale it back. So for me personally, I know what I have to make in order to survive, and I usually use that as a gauge. And I also take into consideration that none of us are working right now, and that's difficult. So sometimes it becomes about charging something a little bit less and having more volume in order to make that up. So hoping that I get X amount of students to make up what it is I need to sustain this whole thing. But you absolutely need to be practicing. You also have to look at the market. What will the market bear? If everybody else is charging $8 or $10 per class and you're charging $17 per class, how do you justify that? What are they getting for the $17? Yes, they're hanging out with you. Yes, they're practicing with you. Yes, it's going to be a great class. However, online classes are very different from live and in-person classes, and there's a lot of great stuff out there for free. So you really, if you're going to charge a little bit more, what are you offering that's different? Are you going to talk to students after or before? Are you going to have a personal Facebook group where people can interact with you? Like, where's the value for the money? Because right now people are in this kind of scarcity place. So you really have to consider, what will the market bear and what do I need in order to make this sustainable for myself?
Yeah, so I think what I would add to that is figure out what you need to make for it to be worth your while, to show up, to prepare, to deal with all the tech troubleshooting. Like, this isn't just the 1 hour or however much time that you're in front of folks, but like all the time that you had to prepare, come up with that rate, and then maybe like divide it by the amount of people coming. Can you make it work or not? Like, that's usually what I do when I'm trying to figure out how to price like a retreat or a workshop or something like that, is like, what are the fixed costs? I got to make sure those are covered. How much time am I putting in? And can I come up with a rate that feels fair for me? What I would say is that during this time, like I know a lot of people are offering free stuff. I know people are offering deep discounts. But what I want to say is that not everyone is experiencing the same financial difficulty right now. I see people in my neighborhood every day who are supposed to be at home, but are going to Home Depot and buying potting soil and plants. And like, they're not at all, like I'm holding on to every dollar I have, you know? So like people are in different situations, and some people do want to support you at this time. Like Shannon said in the chat, like she would like to pay full price and like support teachers, because none of us are working in the same way right now that we were before, even though many of us still are working a lot. It seems like a lot more than we were before, right? And so I want to say something also that Jasal said, which is that it's nice to have a few different price points. And this is actually what Diane and I are planning to do for our online course that launches next week. Is, you know, we've run this course twice a year rather than like a deep discount for everyone, because not everyone necessarily even needs that discount. Some people do want to support us. We are offering a few different rates. So we'll have the rate that it costs. That's like the middle price. We have the rate that's a little bit higher. If you can afford to pay like, you know, a little bit more, that's going to go to sustain the sponsorship rate, which is going to be lower than what it normally costs. And so giving people a chance to either self-select into one of three prices is usually a really good amount to offer for folks to not be like, oh, there's like 20 different price points. I can't make a decision. You know, when you go to a restaurant and the menu is like 50 pages long, rest in peace, restaurants. But you know, when we used to go into restaurants and there's like a menu that's 50 pages, it's like harder to decide than if there's like 10 items, right? And so I like having those three price points to let people self-select. It works really well. And people usually do pick the one that they actually need. And so I find a pretty even distribution between the three whenever I've done that. I think there's also an opportunity to do like a pay what you can. One way that you can do that is if you use PayPal. There's a link that anyone with a PayPal account can get that's like paypal.me/Amber Karnes, or like whatever URL you pick. Then if you put a slash at the end of that and any number, it will let you like pick the amount, right? So it could be like /25 and that'll be for 25, but you can just let people go to that link and pick the amount. Venmo, Cash App, those kind of things work really well where it's like pay what you can and donation based. But I think setting up the three price points is really a smart way to do it. And usually like works pretty well to let folks opt in. And then usually what I do is just like, if I'm not saying this is for everyone, but I usually have a disclaimer, which is like, if these pricing options don't work for you, like no one will be turned away. Email me to like work it out, and then you can have an individual conversation. Do you want to add anything before we move on to a different kind of question?
No, I like sliding scale pricing. I think that's fantastic. Yeah. And just like I said, I look to see what everybody's kind of doing and keep it within that range. I know we're all like stressing out, and I know a lot of yoga teachers are looking for practices. So I whenever I can, I have a whole bunch of people who are like independent contractors helping me with my business. I'm paying everybody for as long as I possibly can. So it's just whatever you can do, right?
Right. Okay, let's see. A few people asked the question, what tools do you use to build your online teaching presence, or what tools do you suggest? Is there anything specific that you feel like has worked really well for you, Diane?
I owe my entire career to social media, starting with Facebook and Instagram. Like I wouldn't have this job. I wouldn't do these things if it weren't for social media. And that's kind of how I built my online presence, is being engaging, creating Facebook groups initially, creating Facebook groups, inviting my friends, telling my friends to invite their friends, offering tips, writing blogs. These are the way I started in the online world. Is I wrote a blog in 2011 called Yoga Isn't Just for Skinny White Girls on Elephant Journal. And that was when Elephant Journal wasn't like publishing a lot of sensationalized stuff. They were still relatively, I think, new, and you could trust a lot of the content. I can't speak to that anymore. But I wrote a blog post, 2011, 2012, somewhere around that. And that is how my whole career started, because that thing went viral. Not only did Skinny White Girls come for me, but everybody else who was feeling marginalized by this practice had something to say. So that's kind of how I started, is finding platforms that were free to use at the time, and writing about my experience of being a yoga teacher, writing about what I offered, writing about all the things that kept me off my yoga mat in terms of how I felt, marginalized by but sharing an authentic snapshot of who I was on social media is what, elephant journal, nice, is what got me started. And then, so I continue to leverage social media, because it's what I think about social media is it's the democratization of celebrities. So everybody has a platform. Everybody can share what they need to share. You can reach out to different groups. I've been exploring Pinterest as of late. There's lots of great ways to interact, and Pinterest is still relatively free, unlike, Facebook and Instagram for paying for ads and things like that. Pinterest is still relatively free and isn't really marketed as a social media platform. It's more of a search engine. So when people are looking for stuff, they're going for Pinterest to figure out how to do just about anything. So I've been really leveraging that lately, but social media has been the number one way that I have been able to create a following, to cultivate a brand, if you will, to connect with people outside of my immediate regional community. And that's what I've done, because it's free, because it has a reach. It used to be a lot easier. When I started in this online platform, there weren't paid ads for Facebook, right? And Instagram didn't even exist. So there wasn't paid ads. So your reach would go farther by reaching out to your friends and saying, I'm going to create this post. Can you share it on your platforms? And we could do more, and your reach could go further. Now it's a little bit different if you're using social media to create your following. You need to sometimes invest a little bit of money in order to reach a broader audience. So that's been the number one way that I've connected. I've also created like a sign-in or an opt-in on my website. It was funny. I've had a website since 2005, and I just remember my husband going, well, let's figure out how to create a website, and put up this really janky website, and having a place where people could meet, and then having kind of like at the time chat rooms on your website. That's very different now, because now we have Facebook groups, and just linking that way. Also having that opt-in form on my website, sign up for my newsletter, and every month I send out a newsletter giving people tips on, how to be consistent in your yoga practice, constantly asking questions, popping up. I know right now there's a lot of noise on social media. Like every time I go onto Instagram, who's going live? 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 So it's, after a while I just start to ignore that stuff. But that was the way that I started. I really leveraged my social media and invited people who liked what I was sharing to continue to share as social proof. I posted a lot of pictures of myself so people could see the different forward-facing imagery. But you have to realize, I've been online since 2005, so it's a very different world now, 15 years later, in terms of leveraging and trying to stand out amongst a crowd. But whatever you have to offer is unique to you. And I would recommend having a professional, either Facebook, or both Facebook, Instagram page. I would also look at creating boards on Pinterest, interest boards on Pinterest, finding ways that you can share your content in exchange for people's email addresses, so that you can stay in contact and build your community that way. I know that Amber is much better at this than I am. I kind of fell ass backwards into the whole thing. There wasn't like a whole lot of internet marketing around this going on in 2005. So it's kind of, for me, it's been really, oh, this works. Okay, let's just do more of that. Oh, that didn't work. Let's not do that anymore. So that's a lot of it. And a lot of these platforms in which you're going to be sharing yoga on may have a social aspect to it that will give you lots of opportunities to see how to build a social media following, so that you can, perhaps increase the size of your yoga classes. There's lots of stuff on that. Google is a great tool and resource for how do I build up my following. A lot of that stuff I follow all the time. And, following other people who do similar things to you and sharing their content. Like, I was obsessed with Amber Karnes on YouTube. I was like, she was the first plus size person on YouTube telling me to strap my titties down when I'm doing yoga. Like, it was just like, I was like, who is this person? And then I would reach out to them and figure out how to collaborate. Of course, she ignored me. I didn't know her comments were turned off. And I was like, for years, trying to get Amber Karnes' attention until she showed up in my inbox. So, reaching out to people who are doing similar things to you and supporting each other so that we are, in each other's feeds and people can see that this is a community that we're trying to build.
Yeah. One thing that I would say that has really helped, well, I have a lot of thoughts on this. And one thing you may not know about me is that, what is a good bra? That's a good question that came into the chat.
I can tell you. And now
type it in there, Diane. Okay, so before I was teaching yoga full time, my career was in marketing and in content marketing specifically. So it's kind of two kinds of marketing. There's like traditional marketing, which is like advertising, right, where you have to spend a lot of money. And then there's content marketing, which is you provide a lot of educational value, or you like really make people care about the work that you're doing. You share stuff. And then when it's time, you make an offer, and then hopefully you've built enough rapport and trust with your customers. I'm going to start using marketing language. So listen, you're the business, you have customers, right? I want you to like kind of think about it in that way. You're demonstrating so much value to your customers that when it's time to spend money with you, they are so happy because you've built that trust, like you've provided value to them. And so less important, in my opinion, than the particular platform that you use is like, how are you going to make people care about what you're doing? And one of the questions that came in was like, how do I stand out in this like sea of yogis who are now suddenly online? Plus there's like, the people who have been online a long time, like who even cares about my work? And I've heard that question a lot in the past couple of days and weeks. So for me, it's really about like, what makes you different as a teacher? And how can you stand out? Like, what lived experience do you have that can really, like Diane said, she posted about, feeling like yoga wasn't for her because she wasn't a skinny white girl. Like, are you marginalized in some way? And you can share something about that experience that people can identify with. Do you have something particular that you can teach? Like Diane was mentioning that video I made a long time ago about like how to keep your chest out of your face when you go upside down. Like, is there something that you could teach in that way? Maybe it's just that, your students practice with you because you really have that like calm, nurturing presence that's hard for them to find elsewhere. Like, your students don't just want to practice yoga online, they want to practice with you. So I want you to remember that when you sit down to like decide what you're going to create. The second piece of advice I would give is let your strengths determine the medium and the platform that you share on. So some of us are really good on camera. That's because we've practiced, not because it's any kind of natural innate ability. So some of it is just like with time, that experience will come. Remember the first time you taught a class and it felt impossible to stand in front of a class of people and actually teach yoga, and you didn't even know how to tell people where to put their foot. And then we've gotten better as it goes on. So know that just like with teaching any class, teaching online is a skill that you're also going to have to build before you feel comfortable. But what I would say is like, start where you already feel comfortable. So if that's in front of a camera, great. If you're one of those people that is a great speaker, but you get all like stiff and wooden in front of a camera, maybe you want a podcast rather than a camera. Or just an audio, an MP3 that people could download. If you're a great writer, maybe what you start doing is start writing tutorials or like step-by-step or sharing your story online. I would say like, if you're a visual person, then maybe you're going to create some kind of like, video or collage or something that's going to be the delivery point of your message. So start where you feel comfortable. Like for me, it's much easier for me to generate video content than it is written content, just because writing takes me longer. And so that might be kind of a good place to go. Like, where do you have money on the table that you're like, oh yeah, I have a strength in this area? I would also say that like, as far as platforms, you know, Diane mentioned the idea that like Facebook, you didn't used to have to pay for ads. So I just want to explain this in case you're trying to make a lot of posts on Facebook, but you're not getting much engagement. So Facebook and Instagram, for all intents and purposes, are the same thing, and they operate in really similar ways. Where you might have heard about the algorithm, right? The algorithm is basically this really complicated math equation. They've got engineers tweaking it all the time, and it tells Facebook or Instagram or whatever content platform you're on what stuff to show first. And there's a lot of really complicated factors that goes into that. But let's just say on Facebook, you have a page with 100 people that liked it. The last number that I heard was that organic reach, which means how many people that opted in to see your content are actually seeing your content. Organic reach was about 6%. So if you have 100 people that like your page and you post something, only about 6 people are going to see that. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can start to get around this. Number one, you can use your personal profile more than your business page. Facebook knows that businesses try to sell things, and so they're automatically going to make it more difficult for you to see your content as a business than a personal page. I'm not saying don't have both. I'm just saying, like, don't put all your eggs into your Facebook page basket, if that makes sense. I think that it's important just to remember that not everybody who opts into your content on social media platforms are going to see it. So I really recommend everybody start your own email list. This can start very low tech with a Google form where you start collecting addresses. I would say as soon as you can, get some kind of email platform. MailChimp is like a really good one that offers free accounts up to a certain amount of subscribers. And just get people used to hearing from you on a regular basis. Tell them what online classes you have. Send out a newsletter, like Diane said, maybe once a month, where you put a little bit of teaching, right? Maybe that's some content that you've created recently. Maybe that's a note that you're going to write to people about, like, how to let your practice, you know, be solace in times like this, all of that kind of stuff. Maybe you're going to put all the online classes and offerings that you have. Maybe you want to share someone else's work. Get people used to hearing from you. And always, when you're posting something, have a very clear call to action, right? You want them to read something and then take an action. You want to almost like train them to do that, you know, like, so when they get an email from you, they're going to open it, they're going to read it, and they're going to take some action. You're not going to give them 20 things to do. You're going to give them one thing to do. And so that will get people used to hearing from you on a consistent basis. I think consistency is really key, more than like the amount that you generate. So if you can only make one new thing a month, send out that monthly newsletter with the one amazing thing that you're creating, and let people like get used to hearing from you on a regular basis. So maybe I'll stop there. I know we have some other questions to get to, and we're coming up on about an hour that we've been in online, even though we've been here more than an hour since we took a while to get live. While I'm looking through these questions, do you want to add anything to that, Diane?
No, I think that the email list is really important, and getting people used to the idea of hearing from you is really great. Amber's much better at this because this is her background. This is her wheelhouse. The joke that happens in our business in the Yoga for All training is, I'm really good at creating content. And then Alan, my husband, and Amber are really great at all these other avenues for getting people to opt in. I also was doing, when I first started on Facebook, like a Mindful Monday and a Thoughtful Tuesday and a Wellness Wednesday. And so that people were getting used to, like, oh, what's she talking about? And, you know, what are we doing? And getting people to interact with you. I think the biggest and most important part to get people to interact with you online is to ask a question and ask for feedback. Because people just scroll, like, what are you going to do to stop them from just scrolling by onto something else? You know, engage them. And I think it's easier right now to engage people because we're all in a little bit of a state of boredom, right? In terms of what's going on in the world. We're kind of in this holding pattern, but I think it's really all the things that you said I co-sign with, and just making sure that you are, you know, are being authentic. I have to say 100%, when I was putting up a lot of markety kind of posts on my Facebook, I would get no or little engagement. But when I would share about something that's authentically happened in my life, then people can identify with you. So you want to be able to, as you do in the classroom, identify with your students. You want to be okay to identify here online, to be vulnerable and to be truthful. I think those are the things that have been most rewarding in my yoga practice is to know that people feel the same way and people have had the same struggle. And how is it that you connect with people in sharing the things that make us vulnerable? And in that, now I start to sound like Brene Brown, but in that there's strength in that, right?
Totally.
And there's connection in that, because that's what we want to do. My thing about loving social media is I love the social as the extrovert that I am, as the Aries extrovert that I am. I like the social part of social media. So when people send me a message that touches my heart, then I'm inclined to go to their page and check out what they're doing and buy whatever they're selling, because I want to feel connected, right?
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so let me see. This one I'll just answer quickly, and then I'd love for y'all in the chat to chime in. So somebody asked, do you know of any resources of accessible yoga or mental health or trauma sensitive? So you got here through the accessible yoga community. So I would say that is like the best resource. If you can be more specific about the resources that you want, I think then you'll get maybe better answers. And maybe some folks can add in the chat what their favorite resources are. I will just say that this is a pretty good one that just came out. So this is Jivana Hayman's book, Accessible Yoga. Diane also has a book called Yoga for Everyone. I still
Let me go get it,
Diane, but you can go get yours. And then there are tons of wonderful teachers and platforms and things that have been shared in the accessible yoga community. So please go check that out. And then we'll just move on to another question, and maybe y'all can share some of your favorite resources in the comments.
I'm going to show you mine. This is my, if you haven't seen it already, this is also a really great resource. Look at the thickness of this book. This is my friend, Mindy Eisenberg. She's actually across the river in Michigan. You can check her. If you just type in adaptable yoga moves anybody, she teaches to people with multiple sclerosis, but a lot of people in here, a lot of chair stuff, a lot of great stuff. I mean, this book is over almost 400 pages of really great stuff. And then of course you saw Jivana's book already. So these are my resources, my top resources.
And then folks are adding more in the comments. So please check out the Facebook community as well. It's a great place to also ask that question if you are more specific, like if you're looking for, seated practices where you don't get out of the chair, or you're looking for trauma sensitive yoga for, folks that are dealing with eating disorders. Like if you get more granular and specific, you'll be likely to get a lot better answers for that question. Okay, here's one. Scheduling. How long should we stick with one schedule right now versus trying different things to see what sticks in turbulent times? I've been trying to respond to requests and current needs. So maybe I'll answer first, and then Diane, if you have anything you want to add. I would say pick a schedule and stick to it.
Yeah.
I think when
we talked about that, right? Consistency.
Yeah, consistency. And when you're trying to get something going, I think it's important to be consistent, to let folks know, like if you're going to pick, Mondays at noon, because that's the time that works best for you, stick with that and really like push that time. I think also you may want to think about, in the same way that oftentimes it's easier to fill like a series or a workshop than it is to fill like a weekly class week after week after week. You might want to think about structuring some of your online classes where it's like, we're going to do a 4-week series on hip openers, or we're going to do a 3-week series for brand new beginners to yoga. It also may be...
That's the one. If you want to build a following and you want to build, get a lot of people into yoga, a 4-week series on intro to yoga is the way to go.
Yeah. And then I think just being really consistent and communicating. And I do like to ask, I like to do what's called social listening and ask people like, what's the best time for you? But also just know that that's changing right now for everybody pretty much on a daily basis. So don't get discouraged. Don't beat yourself up if your class is empty. For me, anytime that I try something with marketing that doesn't work, I really try to look at it as an experiment and a way to iterate and get better next time. Like, it's not a failure, it's a lesson. And I think that's a really important thing, especially if you're just starting out teaching online, to not look at people who have been doing this a long time and then get discouraged because they say like, oh, 50 people came to my class, or, whatever. It takes some time to get this going. And maybe if you don't have people show up, to me, I'm always asking myself the questions like, Did I like advertise this in the right place? Did I invite the right people? Did I actually like send out any personal invitations, or did I just post it once to Facebook and hope that people showed up? Did I ask my friends to share the content? Is the messaging right? Is it clear what I'm offering? Get somebody to do like a clean read of it and see like, somebody that doesn't know you or somebody that doesn't know much about yoga, and maybe ask them like some questions and see if they got it, like what you were offering, right? So sometimes it just takes a little bit of tweaking to figure out like how to advertise it or connect with folks just a little bit better. Diane, do you have anything you want to add to that question?
No, I love the idea of a series. When I was taking my yoga teacher training, I trained with a teacher named Betsy Downing, and she was running a yoga studio that only ran series. Like you couldn't come and do a drop-in class; you could only sign up for a series. And she had like the most successful studio in I think Sarasota, Florida, for running those, because once you run a series, people have paid a set amount of money and they're committed. They know on Tuesday and Thursday at 9:30, this is the only class they have access to. So they're more likely to show up and be invested in the practice. The second thing that I've learned to be true is everybody's a beginner. Like I call myself perhaps an advanced beginner or an experienced beginner, but everybody's a beginner and everybody's nervous. So what we want to do is appeal to those people possibly who aren't doing yoga, but who want to try, right? There was a study done by the magazine that will remain nameless a few years ago, along with Yoga Alliance, about how many people are practicing yoga, somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 million people, and then all the other people who want to try and who are scared. So if you're looking to build your following, you want to tap into those people who haven't found yoga yet. So it's really lovely to do a yoga basics class, a yoga one-on-one, a vinyasa one-on-one, and introduce people into the practice. And it's great to do a series because everybody's starting at the same place. This is for raw beginners. This is for brand new beginners. This is for people who don't know what a sticky mat is. This is for people who are not familiar with the history of yoga. Teach something on the history of yoga if that's your thing. But a beginner series is the best way to build your following, because these are brand new people who've never practiced before. What ends up happening is people who practice yoga is that we get attached to a teacher or we get attached to a style, and we're less likely to venture out to other teachers because we have formed this sense of trust or alliance with this one teacher. So in the yoga industry in general, if you want to be sustainable, you are looking for that new student, because I have found from owning as a yoga studio for 10 years and for teaching for 35, yoga is transient. People slide in, people slide out, people go over and do something else, and then they come back. But what I have found is that they keep coming back if you're offering something that is of value to changing their life or connecting with themselves or making peace with their body or creating opportunities to participate in social justice or any of those things. So I am always appealing to that newer student because they need it so much more. And I know that students who are more experienced will find what they need wherever they go.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. I just wanted to answer a quick question. So Jillian was like, after the COVID-19 thing is over, do you think people will still be interested in online classes? I would say yes, because Diane and I both have made at least half of our living online for the past several years. And so, yes, people are interested in online classes. I will say especially that if you're a teacher who has something unique about your teaching, if you offer accessible practices, if you offer something where folks who maybe don't feel comfortable going into yoga studios or fitness spaces, they want to practice online often, or maybe they want to practice with you so they can get the tools to be able to take their practice back into their own hands and then go to a yoga studio where the teachers might not know how to serve them. Yeah. And so when you're thinking about creating online content, maybe start with the folks that who you've tried to get to come to your classes before, but they never came. Talk to them. Maybe ask some questions about why, what is it about like practicing from home or not going into a studio that appeals to you? And maybe just start there and really like listening to the folks that, that maybe will be served better by online classes. Okay, so I want to go ahead and wrap this up soon. But let me see if there's one other question that we could. Well, there's a few other questions that came in that we probably won't have time to get to, but we will try to answer them in the accessible yoga community. So I may get Melanie's help to post some of that stuff. somewhere. So let's see. Someone asked if we would have access to the chat afterwards. I do believe that we can export the chat, or it'll be exported with the archive, but I will find that out. And then let's see. Maybe the last question that I'll ask you, Diane, before we just tell people how they can get involved with what we have going on, is folks have asked me, like, how do you appear calm on camera? Or how do you not look like you're like all stiff and, you know, whatever. Like, I've seen a lot of people who, being in the room with them, I'm like, oh, they're such an amazing teacher. And then you put a camera in front of them and it's like, hi, we're going to do some yoga today and stuff. So what are your tips for overcoming that fear, or for being, or for at least appearing calm on camera, even if you don't feel calm?
I use my yoga, man. Like, I take long, slow, deep breaths. And what I also picture is when I'm looking at the camera that I'm teaching to one person. So what I will do is that I will picture like my friend Julianne, because Julianne and I have been practicing. If you follow me on Instagram, you've seen her on my channel. Her and I have been practicing together for over a decade. And so when I'm teaching online, I'm actually honestly teaching to her, or I'm thinking of somebody in my class in that camera. I'm not thinking that I'm teaching to a lot of people, because if I do that, then I will freak myself out and become wooden and less animated. So for right now, I'm actually talking to Amber. I'm not actually talking to anybody else. And that makes it easy for me to be on camera. And I just be myself. And if things screw up and I forget my right from my left, or if I fall over or whatever it is, I just own it. Like, you want it to be, once again, as authentic and as easy and as breezy as you are. But yeah, that's what I do. I pretend I'm teaching to one person, or I picture my favorite class to teach to, and I picture those students in front of me, because often they are on the other side of that camera. And I find that so helpful, right? Like, so helpful. And for me, I just saw this quick question I want to answer. The camera that I'm actually using to film everything that you see so far is my iPhone X. I used to use a Lumix camera, and I used to use a Canon camera, and I can link to those cameras online. And then what would happen is the audio wouldn't be working, or Amber and I have had, Amber's filmed with me in this very space, and we have had many a drama with cameras. And so I am not feeling that anymore. So I film everything on my iPhone, and I edit everything in iMovie, and that's it. That's all I do. I film it on my camera, I download it to my computer or airdrop it to my computer, and I edit it. If we're doing more longer professional videos, my husband edits in Final Cut Pro. And there's lots of tutorials on YouTube on how to do these things. If you don't have a mic, you can record to your voice memo, and you can sync it up in iMovies. There are tons of tutorials on YouTube. I've learned everything about having an online studio, which is what you see behind me with all my lights. I've learned everything I know about this, either by trial and error, because I've had an online studio since 2012. Trial and error. If you go to my site, you'll see stuff in the archives that just is horrible. The sound is horrible. The lighting is horrible. The angle is horrible. And then I'm like, oh, wait, that didn't work. Let's try something else. And everything I've learned from that is like, oh, let me go on YouTube. How do I light a space? What lights do I need to use? And there are tons of YouTubers out there who make their living just being YouTubers that will tell you everything you need to know on how to record yourself. And that's a lot of good information. And that cuts away from the trial and error of stuff. So I know I went off topic here. I just saw that, that come up, and I just want to answer that quick.
Yeah, and I'll just echo what Shannon just posted. Do a B- job to start. If you wait until you can do A+, you waited too long. Yes, that is like really good wisdom. I think whether it's like a project you're working on, a new class you're trying to teach, getting online at all, like, don't let perfection like become the enemy of like just getting it done. Like, ship it and then make it better next time. Like, learn from it and do that. What I will say about being on camera thing is just a couple of things. I love the idea of like imagining that you're talking to one person or whatever. I do that too. And when I first started appearing on cameras, I didn't really feel comfortable. I would actually take a little picture of somebody that makes me laugh, or like I'll take a little picture of my husband or whoever I was thinking of, and like tape it on the camera. So then I like remember, like, I'm talking to that person. You know what I mean? I also, look into the camera. Like, don't, you know, especially if it's something like this where you can see yourself, or you have your phone turned around where you can also see yourself, don't look at the screen. Like, actually just look into the camera, because that will make it feel, for the folks who are watching, like you're making eye contact with them. And it might make you a little less self-conscious to be like looking at yourself the whole time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think too, one thing that has served me really well is that, I don't know, I'm one of those people that has like resting bitch face. And so like, I always have to be more animated on camera than I would in real life. Like, I normally wouldn't come into a class and be like, hi everyone, welcome. My name's Amber. You know, like, I wouldn't be like that animated, but like on a camera, it really comes across, let's say like it's 30%, you know, as illuminated as you would be like in normal life. So I'm not saying you need to be like, happy all the time, but just know that like, you may think, you know, you've seen a picture of yourself before and you're like, I was totally smiling, and the picture looks like, like, so just know that like your energy will not come across on camera as strongly as it will in person. So like, play it up a little bit, you know, be more animated, talk with your hands, like really, you know, have your face be like bright. I don't know exactly how to explain it, but if you're like a little bit more bubbly than you normally are, it does like read a little bit better.
Think about things that make you happy while you're talking. Like, do you know what I mean? Think about things that make you smile while you're talking. And I'm already a pretty animated person, but I can't stress enough to use your hands and move your head around. Try not to be stiff and just be in your body. Like, that is really important. And that translates really well on camera, because it feels like you're interacting with people when you do that. Try not to be stiff, try not to be scary, but just pretend you're kikiing, that's my favorite word, with your favorite girlfriend. Like, I'm talking to Amber this whole time. I'm not even looking at the comments. And I'm just like, hey, Amber, hey. And that energy will translate. Like, you know what I mean? Just be, like you said, 30% more of yourself. It's okay. It's okay to ham it up, because to a certain degree, people are looking to be uplifted in this space, and people are looking to be connected in this space. And it's very different from being in this like serene, maybe yoga space. This is a different space we're dealing with, and people are looking to feel better, and people are scared, and people are unsure. So the more animated I think you can be within reason, that doesn't look like, you know, over the top, the more people will connect with that, because they're looking for that, right? They're looking for something. They're looking to feel better.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Well, we're going to wrap this up, but I wanted to tell y'all before we go, Diane and I, we co-created the Yoga for All online teacher training in 2015, and we've been running it twice a year ever since. So this will be, what are we going into our 6th year of doing this? It's kind of wild to think about. We're pushing the launch date up a little bit. We were going to do it like late April. And so now we're going to be able to, you'll be able to register early for the course. But what we really want to tell you about today is that we have a free mini training. Melanie has the link if you don't mind putting that in there.
Melonie's on it, man. Thanks, Melanie.
On it. Yes, we really appreciate it.
Melanie.
So if you click this link and sign up, you will be able to get 3, or actually it's 4. It's like 3 videos, and then we send a bonus video, 2 from Diane and 2 from me, that are brand new content that we have never like sent out before. This is stuff that you'll be able to take into your teaching practice right away. Diane's doing a video about like yoga and social justice and how to incorporate that. We've got one about adapting poses for larger bodies and sort of a troubleshooting like 2-step system that I'll teach you. Diane did one on hand and wrist pain, like how to go do variations on poses and build strength in hands and wrists for folks that need to adapt their practice. And then I'm doing a video about fighting imposter syndrome. So especially for those of you that are like, why would I offer content? Everyone else is doing it. No one's going to care. No one's going to see me. That video is for you. So go sign up. These are completely free. No obligation to like join the course or do anything. We just want to share those tools. You can find them at yogaforalltraining.com. And Melanie put the direct link into the chat. That will take you to that sign up page. So we're happy to share that content with you. Diane, anything you want to add before we sign off?
I just noticed that Lisa was asking, will you repost the links someplace else where we can access them later? And yes, I'm sure we'll just repost them in this group?
Yeah, I think what I'll do is, Melanie, actually, if you don't mind, well, we'll touch base about it, but we'll start a thread where we have the links that we shared, as well as like a couple of the questions that we didn't get to that I would just answer with a link anyway. Like there was one about how do we get our emails to land in inboxes instead of promotions. Like there's some really good tutorials online. So we'll answer some of those other questions that we didn't get to over at the Facebook group. So please check back there.
Yeah.
And thank you everyone for joining us. Diane and I are happy to be of service during this time. And we hope to see you in the Yoga for All mini training. And if not, then maybe we'll see you in the accessible yoga community. Thanks for your patience. Thanks for being here, Diane.
My pleasure, Amber.
All right. Talk to y'all later. Bye.
Bye.